I'm excited for the Jaguars under Doug Pederson.
No, I am too, and I like the idea of them bringing in Brandon Scherf from the Washington Commanders or the Washington football team, whatever they call themselves these days, like being able to fortify that offensive line that's anchored by Cam Robinson and Jawan Taylor. I think that's always a great place to start when you have a rookie quarterback. And then, of course, with you got the guy, Laquan, they got Laviska Shenault, and you got Marvin Jones and Zay Jones, and then they paid a boatload of money to Christian Kirk. I think that has the makings of a solid receiving core. It's not going to be one of the best receiving cores, but those guys are going to be reliable. And then you got the 1-2 punch of James Robinson and ETN in the backfield. ETN, of course, coming back from the Achilles injury. So I like what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball, Carlin. But the most important thing for me with the Jags is that they have an adult in the room.
Yeah.
And no matter what you want to think of Doug Pederson, it's better than having Urban Meyer as your head coach and him creating headlines that then become distractions that players have to answer for in the locker room. So getting rid of Urban Meyer and hiring somebody that's a proven winner at this level is going to be huge. Another thing that I like about Doug Pederson, he's somebody that's proven that he can develop quarterbacks. Whether you're talking about working with Carson Wentz or you're talking about him working with Nick Foles, Doug Pederson has been able to find a way to be able to make it work and to get guys to play above the X's and O's. So that, to me, is got to be huge for Jacksonville. The only question that I have about the Jacksonville Jaguars in terms of the culture that they're trying to create is what's going on in the front office. Because they still got Trent Baalke around there, Carlin. And here's the thing. I like some of the decisions that they made this offseason, but it's like when you're trying to show your work to get partial credit, like when you don't show your work, or you don't find the right way to get to the answer that you came to, that has to give you a little cause for pause. And that's where I'm at with that front office for Jacksonville. Because if you remember, Jacksonville was interested in hiring Byron Leftwich. That ended up falling through. He didn't become their head coach, and a big part of it was because he didn't feel comfortable with Trent Baalke being the one that was responsible for the final 53. They also flirted with hiring Adrian Wilson to be their general manager and moving Baalke in a different role. That didn't pan out. And so Trent Baalke being this figure that's looming over the Jacksonville Jaguars, it doesn't make me feel comfortable. It really reminds me of what's going on with another team in the AFC South, the Houston Texans, and that whole Jack Easterby thing. That's the kind of person that Trent Baalke has kind of turned himself into.
That's not good.
With the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so I think that's one of the things that we have to watch early on in the season as this team, kind of tries to find itself and build an identity. What happens with the front office and the front office's relationship with the coaching staff, because those two have to be in lockstep in order to create anything that's worthwhile.
To that point, I am most curious about Trayvon Walker. That feels like one of those picks where they better be right. They better be right, because Aiden Hutchinson felt like a much more sure thing, and yet they opted to go with Walker. And we know what the talent is, but Chris, so many times we have seen those guys who are uber talented that deserve to be near the top of the draft, yet they never quite follow through with what they're supposed to be. I mean, you and I talked before the draft. Trayvon Walker was the third best defensive lineman on Georgia, and one of them's still there.
Yeah.
So this is, to me, when we talk about athleticism and you get caught up in these kinds of things, I worry about a team that pays too much attention to all the little drills and how amazing a player is at it, and the fact that he can go out there and run, what did he run, a 4.5, something ridiculous like that.
4.51 at 275 pounds.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is hard to ignore, Carl. And I'll say this, I think Trayvon Walker has the potential to be a much better pro than he was a college player, just because Kirby Smart and that staff asked him to do a lot of different things at Georgia. But here's the deal. If he fails, if he's a bust, then that's on Trent Baalke. Because there are several other players that were worthy of being the number one overall pick on the defensive side of the ball, and you decided you were going to go with Trayvon Walker. There's no one else to blame but the general manager in that situation when you have the number one overall pick. You got to nail that pick. And so we'll see how that ends up working itself out. But I do like some of the things that they've done on the defensive side of the ball. They added a guy that you and I are both familiar with, Foley Fatukasi, defensive tackle from the Jets.
Very underrated player.
Underrated player, going to bring a lot of leadership to that locker room. And then they also drafted the inside linebacker from Utah, Devin Lloyd, who has a ton of range and is going to be a good fit to replace Miles Jack. So I like some of the things that they've done on the defensive side of the ball, especially with their front seven. They got to work some things out with the back end of that defense. But, I mean, Jacksonville is building to something. The most interesting thing about this team, Carlin, is what is going to be their identity. What are they going to be early on in the season? That's what I want to see under new head coach Doug Pederson. We know that Doug Pederson believes in having a strong offensive line and a strong defensive line, and they've made decisions to that end this offseason. So it'd be interesting to see if they're able to take all of the potential that they have on paper to the football field this fall.
And remember one thing about Doug Pederson. You think Brandon Staley rolls the dice. Doug Pederson is in that discussion because he will go for it in maybe not quite to the level of Staley in some bizarre situations, but he will go for it in some head-scratching situations. And if he feels like he has a team that is just building and can sneak out a win or two with one or two plays, he's going to do that. They go from 3 wins to 6. Is that fair?
Something like that. What they got working for them, Carlin, is that they are tied for 26th in strength of schedule, and they play in the AFC South.
Yep.
So those are the things that they have going for them. And you got to feel good about their quarterback situation in comparison to pretty much everybody in the division save the Indianapolis Colts. So, I am bullish on the Jacksonville Jaguars' future. I don't know if that necessarily means that they're going to contend for a playoff spot this year because the AFC is that deep. But I don't think this is a team that's going to be in the cellar looking up in their division. They're going to be better than that this year.
Trevor Lawrence, does he this year take a major step forward? Is he the guy?
Yeah, he's the guy.
I agree.
He's the guy.
He's the guy.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.